With the launch of the new 2024 cars just around the corner, news has broken across Thursday and Friday that two huge names have recommitted to their respective teams with multi-year deals set to go beyond the 2026 regulation changes. Both Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris have signed fresh new deals with Ferrari and McLaren, locking them down and, in the case of Lando Norris, snuffing out any potential Red Bull poach, at least in the short term. I'm Sam Hall, and joining me once again to break down this news is Jon Noble. Welcome, Jon. Now, let's start with the most recent big news. We talked about it during the McLaren livery video about how much Red Bull admired Lando, and we talked in the past about Max and Lando being potential teammates in the future. Do you think Zak Brown was more concerned than he let on about this, especially with Lando's contract as it entered its last 2 years?
I think it's probably a mixture of both the team and Lando wanted to get this put to bed. We spoke to Lando earlier on today, just about, why do it now? Because he's got 2 years left on his contract. In theory, he could have sat back, seen how the car's going, probably taken his pick, because I think any of the top running teams would have taken Lando. But he says this was about giving security for the future, basically, that he's been super comfortable at McLaren. He sees the trajectory they're on. It's onwards, upwards. And he also knows that, if this team is going to make the step it wants to, if it's going to take on, Red Bull, if it's going to fight their wheel-to-wheel with Mercedes and Ferrari, it needs everything to be in place. And what it doesn't need is uncertainty within the camps about where drivers are going and what they're not doing. So Lando says this was as much about settling the team, in that they know he's committed to McLaren, and committing this early shows he has complete faith in what they're doing. So it's about both where the team is at. And I think Lando also, he says he's part of the family. He's grown up this team, and he wants nothing more than to win a championship for McLaren. He's not saying that's going to come next year, this year. He's not going to say it's going to come next year. It's potentially 26 onwards. But he feels the best place that he can win a championship is McLaren.
So as you've said there, Lando must be quite confident that they can challenge Red Bull in, if not the immediate future, the mid-term future, and that's indicated by signing this deal. It's a real statement from him about his belief in the team, but alternatively, could it be looked at that he might have jumped the gun too early, especially given that known Red Bull interest?
I don't think so. I mean, he was asked straight out today, what did Red Bull approach you? What were the status of talks? And, as Lando openly says, I mean, every driver says this, it's the job of every team to speak to every driver, and every driver speaks to every team. You sound out, you work out what the opportunities are. So it kind of infers there were talks, but I think they didn't get very far. I think he saw what the possibility was, and I think McLaren gives him everything he wants. He's a team he knows, he understands, he's been a part of, he loves the atmosphere, it makes him happy, he sees where it's going, and I think it just feels a better place for him to feel that he's going there rather than the uncertainty. Often in times, the grass can be greener on the other side of the fence. You can think you're going to go somewhere and it's all brilliant now, but we're also heading to a 2026. Who knows whose engine is going to be strong. Red Bull have got the new Red Bull powertrains. They're very confident where they're at, but there's no guarantee that they transition through to the new rules formula and it's all brilliant. So I think when you weigh everything up, McLaren seems a very good bet for Lando Norris, because he sees the trajectory. They have turned it around. I think if the season had continued as it started last year and they were struggling to get out of Q1 and Q2 would be viewed a good success, I think he wouldn't have done the deal now. But based on the trajectory, based on the clear confidence he has in the car, he says the motivation and atmosphere in that team now is better than it's ever been. I think he sees that, this is a team going places and he wants to be bang centre in the middle of it.
If I look at this for a moment from a sort of cynical point of view, we compared the team principal merry-go-round to that of football managers, where they seem to be changing more frequently than they have in the past. We also see football players being signed on new deals to increase their value, so transfer fees go up. Could there be an element of this from Zak Brown's point of view, where if Red Bull now want Lando, there's an extra naught, or there's the number has now shot up?
I think that would be a very cynical approach. I mean, I remember years ago, back in 90, early 90s when Eddie Irvine, Ferrari was searching for a teammate for Michael Schumacher, and a press release came out from Jordan saying Eddie Irvine had signed a new contract. My boss at the time said, there we go, this is confirmation that Eddie Irvine's going to Ferrari, because Jordan was super quick to get in there, get Irvine down on a deal, which then ramped the price up, and away they went. Eddie Irvine went to Ferrari. I think if Lando hadn't committed to a new contract and we had seen McLaren bigging up how great he was and how big he was, then I think we could have been in a scenario that McLaren perhaps knew the game was up and he was going elsewhere. But don't think this isn't about McLaren trying to boost Lando's any kind of compensation package or trying to play the market. I think this is about, they see how good Lando is. They know other teams are interested in, and it's about getting other teams, getting their hands off Lando, just as they've got, signed Oscar down till the end of 26. They've got both their drivers down. They don't have to worry about any of the driver market shenanigans. Because I think it's going to be quite an intriguing season now with basically Leclerc, Norris, Piastri, Verstappen all off the market into the new rules era. Who's going to pick off who? Because I think there's more good seats available than there are class kind of what I'd call the A+ drivers out there.
And you've mentioned him then, so we'll move on to Charles Leclerc. He's been with Ferrari since he signed up to the Ferrari Driver Academy in 2016, so this news was more expected. What does Ferrari need to do to reward his faith in the team?
Well, race-winning car, I think, is the main thing.
It's what they all want.
I think yeah, exactly. I think Charles is kind of a similar situation to Lando in that he's part of the Ferrari family. They've been through some ups and downs, but he came, faith through the junior academy. They, gave him this kind of year in the Sauber to push himself up. He's turned up there. He's pole positions. He's won races. He tried to fight for a championship, but that kind of the 22 season, didn't have the duration of that championship challenge to go all the way. But I think it's all about giving them the car. A top team needs a top driver if it's going to win, and a top driver needs a top car if he's going to have any success. But I think they have to have faith. I think, again, he's seen what Fred Vasseur has been able to do in the short time he's been there. And there weren't really many other options. If you want to become a world champion in Formula One and be pretty sure that by 2026, because I think no one can predict where Red Bull's going to be this year and next year, for sure. But I think 26 is viewed as the huge opportunity. You basically need to engineer yourself into one of the kind of Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, potentially McLaren seats to have a good shot. Then pending, how Aston Martin shakes out potentially over the next 2 years or so.
We discussed the links that Lando obviously had with Red Bull, but on a similar note, there had been some speculation linking Leclerc to Mercedes, potentially as Lewis Hamilton's eventual replacement. Was there anything substantial behind these rumours, or was it just typical paddock talk?
Well, I think, as Lando said, every driver speaks to every team. I mean, when these rumours often pop up, at what point does X team speaks to X driver become an actual story? Because it's the job of every team has to know what every other decent driver is up to, and every driver needs to know what teams are up to, and managers need to know who's available, what the opportunities are, where things are going at. So if there were any talks, I don't think they got potentially very far. But equally, I think Charles is a driver who would make sense for any team going forward over the long term. Will Lewis stick around in Formula One in 26? I think a lot depends on kind of the success of Mercedes and how big that step forward goes forward. I think there's a scenario of Lewis that if they'd come out of 2021 and Mercedes had been dominant and we'd had 2 years of complete domination for him and he won that 8th, 9th championship, I think potentially now I'd probably think I've achieved it all. Do I want to carry on and keep doing this? I've got a billion other things to do in my life. But I think actually having had 2 difficult years, it's probably extended his career because that motivation, hunger to keep going and grab that championship is there. So I think if the disappointments continue, potentially he might decide this isn't going to happen. But equally, 26 is going to be very tempting for everybody because it is the big unknown. It's the big uncertainty. The dice will be rolled, and someone's going to come out and have delivered a 6, and you aren't going to know who that is until they hit testing first prior to the first race.
And arguably, we won't even know it then. Everyone's been a bit of a walled garden for drivers, and that's meant that 2024 marks the first time that we actually start this coming season with an identical grid to the one that finished the previous year. Does the cost cap mean that teams are having to now play it safe with drivers, and is it more of a problem for young drivers? Because we saw what happened with Haas when they had Schumacher and Mazepin and the cost that had on the team.
I think there's a bigger challenge now in getting rookies into Formula One, because you can't, the midfield, well, what is the midfield? Which is basically the midfield extends from behind Red Bull all the way back to the bottom these days, that it's so compressed and so tight. You can't afford to have a whole season of bringing a rookie on if they aren't prepared. And I think Piastri has changed the game in this respect, that he did so much testing for Alpine in that year out that he was up to speed, the mileage was there, that this is now the benchmark for if you're a rookie coming into Formula One, you need a full year of testing at all the tracks, proper testing program, and we go again. And interestingly, the testing rules in terms of previous cars you can run up until this year didn't allow you to run a ground effect car, in effect. So would it be much harder in these years to have prepared a rookie? I mean, they did it with Oscar, but I think Oscar is a once-in-a-generation talent. But as we go forward now, you can test a 2022 car. You can test them in ground effect, get them up to speed. So I think if a team wants to commit to a rookie, they'll do it a year in advance or 2 years in advance. And then the following year, there will be full-on testing program, as much mileage as possible, and then they hit the ground running. So I think there's no other way now to bring a rookie in. It's got to be a structured program.
But we're likely to see rookies on the calendar, on the grid next season. It would be astonishing if we go 2 seasons without changing any drivers. Well, I guess we'll see this coming season and beyond if McLaren and Ferrari can live up to the faith shown by Charles and Lando. If you want to see our reaction to the McLaren 2024 livery, click this card somewhere around here. And don't forget to tune in the coming weeks as we cover all the Formula One car launches. See you on the next one.